Republican Senator Bob Corker. He's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and one of the co-sponsors of a bill to give Congress a say on the Iran deal. Senator, thank you for joining us. The big question, do you believe there'll be a vote today?
I do, Chris. It is a very important vote, as you've laid out. And the fact is that Congress, through the sanctions 4 times we've put in place since 2010, has brought Iran to the table. So the question today will be, should the president be able to go directly to the UN Security Council and lift those sanctions without congressional input? Or should the president have to come to Congress and allow us time to review the details of this and have the right to weigh in on this? And, by the way, to stay involved if a deal is approved. Should we have that right prior to going to the UN Security Council relative to the congressional sanctions? And we believe the American people, on their behalf, want Congress to understand the details, understand all the classified annexes that come with a deal like this. And that's what this vote is about today. And my sense is, my hope is that we could and will have a successful vote today.
Well, it will just be a first step, right? You would be looking for some type of, even though the Senate deals with treaties, you'd be looking for both bodies of Congress here to get involved.
That's correct.
Your leverage are these sanctions. We're not sure the White House would push back on how big a part of the equation your sanctions are, the congressional sanctions. But let me ask you this. What about the timing here? If you do this now, don't you feel that you may be compromising the process in lieu of what Secretary Kerry just told you? Let's play the sound for everybody else.
We have 2.5 months more to negotiate. That's a serious amount of time with some serious business still to do. So we hope Congress will listen carefully and ask the questions that it wants, but also give us the space and the time to be able to complete a very difficult task, which has high stakes for our country.
So why take this tack instead of working to compromise with the White House while they're doing the negotiating?
Yeah, well, I think there may be a misunderstanding about what's happening. What Congress is saying is when they finish negotiating, we're not going to be involved while they're negotiating, but when they finish, we want this presented to Congress, and we want it to lay before Congress without the congressional sanctions being lifted. And we want to be able to vote to approve or disapprove if we so choose. And so
But how can they do a deal, Senator? How can they negotiate a deal if the Iran side of the table says, well, you really can't give me any assurances because you have to go to your Congress after this? You know, that's a big set of handcuffs.
Well, look, on any agreement that's reached, whether it's the START treaty, the INF treaty with Russia, in every case, Congress gets involved in those actually in a much bigger way, at a much higher level.
In treaties, but as you know, the overwhelming majority number of agreements that have been made internationally are executive agreements where there is no congressional role.
Yeah, but very seldom has there been a case where Congress has played such a role through the congressionally mandated sanctions. And that's all we're focused on, is making sure that before what we put in place are alleviated, the sanctions we put in place are alleviated, that on behalf of the American people, we're able to go through every detail of this and understand and ensure that it's going to meet the test of time. Iran is the biggest exporter of terrorism in the world, and certainly in the region. And for this to end up being a bad deal, where they end up getting a nuclear weapon, and by the way, have dollars available to export in the region terrorism in a more full way, that is a terrible place for the United States and for the region. And so Congress just wants to be assured. And let me say this, Chris.
Yes, sir.
We know for a fact that in Switzerland, as they negotiated this political agreement, the fact that the negotiators understood that it was likely that Congress was going to play a role. We know that that stiffened the spine of the negotiators and caused the political agreement, where there's debate about what that agreement is, to be even better from the standpoint
of the United States. So you think this pressure helps?
We think this is a very constructive role, and fortunately, there are many members on the Democratic side that have come to agree with that thought process.
Right, but there also seems to be a division. I do not believe you'd get the same sentiment from the State Department or the White House that pressure from Congress is making it easier for them to negotiate. I mean, that wouldn't even really make sense from their perspective.
Every administration would like for, Congress not to be involved. I will say that Secretary Kerry, when he was a senator, President Obama, when he was a senator, attempted to do the same exact thing as it relates to the status of forces agreement in Iraq. So, you know, a lot of times, Chris, where you stand is where you sit. This is the rightful role for Congress to play on behalf of the American people, to make sure that this is a transparent deal, that Iran is held accountable throughout the entire process, that they comply, and that this agreement is enforced.
But you know,
and
Senator,
I'm really proud of the work that in a bipartisan way we've done, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be very successful today.
There's no question that there's reason for concern, and I'm sure that that is what is helping motivate the bipartisanship that you're speaking to, which is certainly somewhat uncommon in the current climate. But you know you're not going to like the deal, right? Almost by definition, when you negotiate something that is this prickly, both sides are somewhat disappointed at the end of it. And in lieu of no other alternative that's coming out of either the Senate or the House, you're kind of setting up a very difficult standard for the White House to satisfy, don't you think?
Well, I don't think so at all. I think that we have the large majority of the people in the United States Senate are sober and thoughtful people, and I think everyone understands the stakes here.
But there's no other plan being offered, is what I'm saying.
What's that?
There's no other plan being offered. You don't have your own deal on the table, right? You're taking a vote as to whether or not you get to approve the State Department's deal, the negotiators' deal. You don't have your own deal.
No, I mean, I don't think that's our role. Our role is to advise and consent. This puts our branch as a more co-equal branch. This is something that, again, is probably the largest geopolitical agreement that will happen during the service of most senators here in the United States Senate. And I'm thankful that on a strong bipartisan basis, people believe that this is something that Congress ought to be doing. I'm also thankful that the integrity of this process, it looks like, will absolutely remain in place. And so I absolutely believe that we are doing the right thing on behalf of the American people. Just look right now, Chris, at the disagreement that's taking place relative to what this deal even is. Iran is saying one thing. Obviously, we're saying something else, and some of the other countries, some things in between. I think it's very, very important to the stability of the region, to the world, to the safety of Americans, that Congress have a role in this. I believe we've struck the exact right balance in the agreement that will be voted on today, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be very, very successful.
Well, obviously, the goal in mind is to make it an easier process, not a more onerous one. We know you have that in your mind as well, Senator Corker.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us to talk it through on New Day.
Thank you.